The words slipped out before I could stop them, and the moment they did, the entire diner seemed to go silent. I had simply looked across the table at the woman who had been my best friend for 12 years and said, my wife would never let me order that much dessert. She froze. The waitress froze. Even I froze. But then my best friend, Emma, slowly lowered her spoon, her cheeks turning bright red, and whispered with a trembling smile, "Don't you dare take it back." I laughed nervously, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. And what happened after that single sentence changed both our lives forever. Before I tell you how we got there, if stories about friendship, love, second chances, and unexpected moments touch your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who believes that true love can begin with friendship, leave a comment telling us what you would have done, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness for more emotional stories about second chances. Emma and I had met when we were 19, during our first week of college. She had dropped an entire stack of books on the cafeteria floor, and I had helped her pick them up. She thanked me, laughed at herself, and somehow we ended up spending the next 6 hours talking. From that day forward, she became the person I called when life felt impossible. She knew every embarrassing story about me, every dream I was afraid to admit, and every mistake I wished I could erase. I knew the same things about her. We were the kind of friends who could sit together for hours without saying a word and still feel completely understood. People constantly asked why we weren't together. We always laughed and gave the same answer, because we were too good at being friends. Neither of us wanted to risk losing what we had. At least, that was what I told myself. A few years later, I fell in love with another woman named Claire. Emma was the first person I told. She hugged me, smiled, and said she was happy for me. But something in her eyes changed that night. I noticed it, but I pretended not to. Claire and I eventually married, and Emma stood beside me at the wedding as my maid of honor. She smiled through every photograph, danced at the reception, and gave a beautiful toast about how lucky I was to have found someone who loved me. But my marriage didn't last. Claire and I slowly became strangers living in the same house. There was no dramatic betrayal, no screaming match that ended everything. Just silence. Endless silence. We stopped asking each other about our days. We stopped laughing together. Eventually, we admitted that we were holding on to something that had already disappeared. The divorce left me exhausted and ashamed. I felt like I had failed at the one thing everyone expected adults to understand, how to build a life with someone. Emma never judged me. During the worst months, she showed up with groceries, made coffee in my tiny kitchen, and sat beside me when I couldn't sleep. She never tried to fix me. She simply reminded me that I wasn't broken. One rainy Thursday evening, nearly a year after my divorce, Emma called and told me she had a difficult week at work. I suggested our old diner, the place where we had celebrated birthdays, survived exam failures, and once spent 4 hours arguing about whether pineapple belonged on pizza. She laughed and agreed. That night, the diner smelled like coffee, butter, and warm cinnamon. Rain tapped against the windows while neon lights reflected across the wet pavement outside. We sat in our usual booth, sharing fries and talking about everything except the things that really mattered. Emma told me about a man she had briefly dated. He had told her she was too independent and that no man would want to come second to her career. She shrugged when she said it, but I could see the hurt underneath. I reached across the table and told her that anyone who couldn't see how extraordinary she was didn't deserve her. She looked at me for a long moment, then smiled softly. The waitress arrived with our food and asked if we were ready for dessert. Without thinking, I pointed at Emma and said, "My wife would never forgive me if I ordered cheesecake without getting her a slice too." The sentence escaped before my brain could catch it. Emma's eyes widened. The waitress smiled knowingly and walked away. I immediately started stumbling over my words, trying to explain that I had meant it as a joke. But Emma leaned closer, her face glowing red, and quietly said, "Don't you dare take it back." My heart stopped. For the first time in 12 years, neither of us laughed. Emma looked down at her hands and admitted that she had been in love with me for years. She had hidden it because she was terrified that telling me would destroy our friendship. She had watched me marry someone else, smiled at my wedding, and cried alone afterward. She had convinced herself that loving me silently was better than losing me completely. I couldn't speak. Then she asked me the question I had secretly been avoiding for years: "Did you mean it when you called me your wife?" I looked at her, and suddenly every memory rearranged itself. Every late-night phone call. Every birthday she remembered when everyone else forgot. Every time she showed up without being asked. Every quiet moment when being beside her had felt more like home than anywhere else. I realized something painful and beautiful. I had spent years searching for a love that felt extraordinary while ignoring the person who had made ordinary life extraordinary all along. I reached across the table and held her hand. I told her I didn't know when friendship had become something deeper, but I knew I couldn't imagine my future without her in it. I told her I was scared, because losing her would hurt more than any failed relationship ever could. Emma squeezed my hand and smiled through tears. She told me she was scared too. We didn't kiss that night. We didn't make some dramatic promise. We simply stayed there until the diner nearly closed, holding hands across the table while the rain slowly stopped. Over the following months, we learned how to become something new without destroying what we had already built. Our first date was awkward because we already knew each other's favorite foods, worst habits, childhood stories, and biggest fears. There were no mysteries left to discover, so we discovered something better, new ways of loving someone we already knew by heart. 6 months later, I took Emma back to that same diner. The waitress recognized us immediately and smiled. I ordered cheesecake for both of us. Then I stood beside the booth, took Emma's hand, and told her that 12 years ago I had found my best friend, but somewhere along the way, I had found my home too. Emma's eyes filled with tears. This time, when I called her my wife, there was no mistake, no nervous joke, and no taking it back. She smiled and whispered, "Good. Because I told you not to." We eventually married in a small garden surrounded by the people who had watched our friendship grow. There were no extravagant decorations, just flowers, laughter, and two people who had finally stopped being afraid of what their hearts had known for years. Sometimes love doesn't arrive like thunder. Sometimes it sits quietly beside you for years, sharing fries, listening to your problems, remembering your coffee order, and staying when everyone else walks away. Sometimes the person you are searching for isn't someone new. Sometimes they're the person who has been there all along. And if this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who needs to believe in second chances, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. Your support helps these stories reach people who may need a little hope today. Before you go, comment, "I would never take it back," if you believe the strongest love stories can begin with the deepest friendships. Because sometimes one accidental sentence doesn't create love. Sometimes it simply reveals the love that was already there.